What's going on? It's your boy Sermon at Sermon's Domain on Twitter. So for today's discussion, I kind of changed the question. Originally, I had thought to myself, what are my favorite G-Unit radio mixtapes? And as I began to do my research and look at them, I thought to myself, this is not an accurate question that I feel that I can answer. And so I changed it more so to reflect what I remember about the G-Unit radio series. So that's why I changed it to what are my fondest memories surrounding the series. Back when the G-Unit radio series was really popping off, from like 2003/4 all the way up to 2007, I didn't have a computer for most of those days. I think at the very end of it all, maybe like G-Unit Radio 24, and I definitely know I had a computer around G-Unit Radio 25, but like 23, 24 is probably when I got a laptop. So back in those days, it wasn't as easy to get like mixtapes. It wasn't as easy to get these songs. And so like some of my earliest memories of the G-Unit Radio series revolve around going on mixunit.com. And MixUnit, for those who don't remember or don't know what it was like a huge online mixtape distributor. So you could buy physical copies of mixtapes and they send it, all of that. And I would log on when I was in high school, probably like sophomore year or, maybe even earlier. And I would look at like a mixtape. So the one that I remember the most fondly is the G-Unit Radio where Spider Loc took over. It was like the entire project was around Spider Loc. And I remember looking at that track listing and having to pick out a song or two that, based on the title or the feature, was something that I would want on a mix CD. Because I had somebody that would burn me a mix CD using stuff that he found on LimeWire. So I would give him a list. And a lot of times I wouldn't be able to get some of these songs. Like, you gotta think, Spider Loc on LimeWire is probably not the first thing that would pop up. There probably wasn't that much back then. And it wasn't as easy to find music in those days. Those days it was like, you had torrents, and then you had LimeWire, you had the other, services that were like that. But it wasn't like today where you could just go on a mixtape site or go and just find the music on YouTube. Back then, it was a lot more difficult. My other memories surrounding the G-Unit radio series kind of revolved around the same thing. I would hear songs here or there. From G-Unit Radio 5, you had a record called I'm So Sorry. And I want to say that I remember that one distinctly because it was around the time that the game was emerging. And he was a member of G-Unit. And it was like, kind of big news. So it was like, who is this guy? And you would find like a record like that and you would get just a little taste of him. This is before the documentary came out. And then also like the G-Unit Radio episode, or G-Unit Radio 8, The Fifth Element, was all centered around the game. So it was like you had like those little moments. I picked up some of these tapes and started listening to them, and I've come to the conclusion that I didn't listen to a lot of them in full. And if I have, I don't remember them. So I never had like a favorite. I have favorite songs scattered throughout the entire series. A lot of the ones that I tend to remember most are like the posse cuts, because that was something that G-Unit did well. They worked together. It wasn't like, oh, here's a Lloyd Banks song, here's a Tony Yayo song, and that's all you're going to get on this mixtape. You're not going to get any collaboration. No, they were really going back and forth. There was a record called Robbery that I think was on G-Unit Radio 11. One of the ones that was from the double digits. It's called Robbery. And it had 50 on it, had Spider Loc, had Prodigy, and I want to say Banks was on it. But it was like a really short one. It was like maybe 2 minutes long. It was a nice little concept. So I really enjoyed that one. I remember the Tony Yayo Leaving Prison. G-Unit Radio 5. And I'm usually against rappers like spitting while they're in the car or doing any type of rapping when they're not in the booth. But this one was great because it was like clear audio and it was just Tony Yayo spitting over G-Unit's popping them things. He was locked up at the time, and so This is him just having a little bit of fun. He said something about Ja Rule, and I was just like, oh, this is crazy. And so that was one that I remember. And another aspect of the G Unit Radio series that I always enjoyed was the fact that 50 and the gang were able to take these popular songs and flip them, make a little remix, their own version of it, but keep like that melody. For instance, G Unit Radio 1, Smoking Day. You had, G Unit take over Busta Rhymes' I Know What You Want. You know, that record from like 2002, I had Mariah Carey on it, huge record. And G Unit, specifically 50, because I think when I think about these remixes, 50 was often like the architect behind flipping the hook, but keeping the melody. And so it was like, baby, if you get on your knees, put me in your mouth and suck me off. Like, I'm just like, that is crazy. Like, it's the same melody of the original, but it's like a lot different. And so I think that also added to like the idea of these remixes being more memorable than some of the other songs. Like, probably G Unit Radio 22, Hip Hop is Dead. This is when like Hot Rod was first coming out. So Hot Rod was on a few songs, and they did a remix to New Edition's, I think it was like Hot Tonight. It was one of those comeback songs that was under, Bad Boy. And I remember them like, it was like, baby, give me your number. Forget it, I don't need your number. And then I don't remember the last part, but it was like that same melody. I will admit that when it comes to the later editions of the series, I'm not as big as probably like the first 10 or first 12 or 13. Like, afterward, it kind of just spiraled out of control. I mean, looking back in hindsight now, it's like, do I really want a whole Spider-Loc mixtape? He wasn't that good of an artist. He had his moments here and there, but it's something that I'm probably not going to revisit in 2017. Freeway signing to G Unit, being a part of G Unit was just a weird addition. And so he had his entire mixtape. Mace, like, that was like a very weird, it wasn't even a signing. It was more of Mace joining G Unit, but he was still technically under contract with Diddy. And so that kind of came into play on G Unit Radio 22. 50 was going after Diddy, for the sake of not releasing Mace's contract or something of that nature. But I remember 50 spitting over like the Dead Prez hip hop beat and, stuff like that. Like, moments like that are what I remember fondly about the G Unit Radio series. It's crazy to think about like the legacy of G Unit and the G Unit Radio series. I mean, the last one was just about a decade ago, and you've seen so many changes in hip hop since. So it's kind of like, damn, where's hip hop gonna be in another 10 years? Because we don't really do mixtapes anymore. A group could come out today and they're not going to be able to make the same impact that G Unit did with a mixtape series. I think when I look at like groups in hip hop today, there's like two that kind of loosely follow like that G Unit Radio formula. One would be ASAP Mob, because they've been putting out the Cozy tapes. And then the other is Brockhampton, who is a collective of a bunch of different rappers, and they're all getting really popular. They put out 2 albums this year, and they're planning a third. Their Saturation album series. And so that to me is like the closest thing that we have to like a G Unit Radio. These are still albums that are on Spotify and iTunes and all of that, but they're coming out within months of each other, and that's how a lot of the G Unit Radio mixtapes came out. It was like you got one, and then a couple months later the other. That's how they were able to put out 25 in the span of 4 or 5 years. And so those are my fondest memories of the G Unit Radio series. Now I want to hear yours. When you think of the G Unit Radio series, what comes to mind? What do you remember most about these mixtapes? Do you have a favorite mixtape from the series? Or what are your favorite songs? I want to hear from you. Talk to me in the comment section below. And then like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, share the video. Follow me on Twitter @SermonsDomain. And as always, thank you for your time. I appreciate you for watching. And until next time, Peace.